Hi, I'm Teresa Coates. I'm the National Educator for Shannon Fabrics. Welcome to Sew Together Tuesday. Today we're going to be working on Pat the Penguin, and we're going to be working on his beak. So if you want to learn how, stick around. So Pat the Penguin is a cute little kit that we have that's available, and it comes with everything that you're going to need except for the batting. Okay, today I'm using a wool batting. We also recommend a high loft poly batting. You can use whichever one you want. You just want something with a little bit of fluff. So today we're going to work on his beak, which is just part of it. And we're going to work through all of the different pieces differently, but the beak is a little extra different. So we're going to work on that today. The fabric that is in the kit already, so it comes with the Cuddle 3 in rust, and I have some of the pieces cut out. You're also going to want the batting. Today I'm using a wool batting, but you can also use a high loft poly, works just as well. You just want something with a little fluff. Then we've got a nice permanent ink pen that we're using that we're going to be tracing with. Superior Threads polyester thread. Clover pins that I love so much. We have our by Annie stiletto, which we're going to use when we're sewing. Our 45mm Olfa blade. I've got some bolts or some nuts here for my pattern weights. You may have pattern weights yourself and you can totally use those. And these are my Femori little scissors, and then of course we're going to have our stretched 9014 needles. Okay, so I've got these cut out, and I need to get 2 of the beak pieces. This is beak A piece. I need 2 of those, so I'm going to cut out one more. I'm going to show you how I do that. I'm going to use the wrong side because that's where I want to trace on. I'm going to make sure that the nap is going the direction that I want it to. So it's running top to bottom at this point, which my little arrow shows me that I want. And I'm going to put it right on the back side, and I'm just going to use my bolts here. Here I'm going to trace around this thing. Okay, and I'm just going to use a nice sharp pen here. This is permanent marker. I'm also going to mark this center because when we put them together we want to match those centers. So once I've got it traced, and you could cut it with the scissors, but I can also cut it with the rotary and it works just as well. Okay, so I'm going to do that because it's not very messy and easy to deal with. So I'm going to right along this edge, and then I'm going to twist it so I can cut away from me with every cut. Okay, all right, twist it again. One more cut, and then we'll have his beak. And now we got 2 beaks. I'm gonna give that a little shake. So now we've got all of our pieces. So I've got 2 pieces of batting and 2 pieces of fabric, just like it says. So I'm gonna put those here. And here I've got 1 piece of the fabric and 1 piece of the batting. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put this black strip on for his smile. That's what sometimes can confuse people. So in the directions it tells you how to do this, but I'm going to explain it in a way that'll be a little more clear for you. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our strip of fabric. It's 1.5 inches by 7 inches, and we're just going to fold this in half. And I'm going to use a couple of pins just to hold it in place for just a second, and then I'm going to pin it along the bottom curve of beak B. So I'm just holding it here in place so I can hold that fold. And I'm going to fold it in half here, and I'm going to pin through both of those layers so I know what the center is. Turn this over. I've got my center marked here. Okay, so I'm just going to stick a pin in here. And then I'm going to match these 2. So I'm matching all of the raw edges together is what I'm doing. So my fold is here, my raw edges are here, and I'm going to pin this in place. Then from there, we're just going to kind of work it out so that it's evenly spread along the side here. So I'm going to take these pins out as I go, and I can refold in along this edge. The only thing you want to make sure is that you're pinning close enough that you're not getting a lot of gap between them. And it's going to come up the sides, not all the way to the very edge where the mark is, all the way over here. So it's just going to feed its way up. What I want to do here is I'm going to fold this in half, and I'm going to mark where this ended on this side so that I can get it even. And then I can open this up, and I know that that's where I want this side to end. So I'm going to pin that down there. That way his smile is at least fairly even. Bring that up, pin that down. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew this in place. So I'm going to get this on a straight stitch, 3.5 stitch length, and I'm going to start sewing right at the edge here. So I'm actually going to watch this side of the foot here because I want to keep it even from this side. So it's a little bit backward from what we're used to. And I'm also going to take the needle all the way over here. And so I'm just going to run this so that it goes right underneath the edge of that foot. So I can try to keep it at about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, it might be a little bit hefty, and that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to just stitch, doing a lock stitch, and I'm just going to keep this nice and flat as it comes around. And like I said, I'm keeping my eyeball over here to make sure that this is working. So you'll notice that it's a little bit of excess over here because it's stretched over here. So we're just going to keep that down in place. You can see I'm kind of pulling it a little bit just to keep things where I want them to be. So that's part of the trick with Cuddle, is you got to tell it who's the boss, okay? And sometimes that includes rearranging. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this definitely takes a little bit of finicky, not too bad. You just want to take your time with it. You end up stitching it and it's real wobbly, you could always just restitch it and it would be fine. Okay, I'm going to cut my thread. All right, and then we'll check it out. Then we're going to come back over here, and it's going to be sewed on a little bit funky, all right? But what it's going to do is it's going to curl back around like this is what we're going for. So I'm going to trim a bunch of this off because that's what makes it lay funny, is all the extra fabric. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off with my scissors. I'm going to cut the orange layer much smaller than the other two, but really it should only be about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's really just a short little seam allowance. And what that does is it lets it roll over really nicely. Okay, so this one, I'm gonna do a little bit bigger, not quite 1/4, a little bigger than 1/8. Okay, and trim all the way around. So now what it will do is flip right over and lay underneath. Okay, so now we're gonna stick it on our beak. So now we take our beak A piece and we're gonna lay it right side up. And this one is gonna go right side up on top of it. Okay, and you can see that top edge matches. So I'm just gonna pin that in place because I don't want it to move while I'm pinning down the other. All right, so I'm gonna pin that here. You could use Wonder Clips too, that'd be fine. All right, and then I'm just gonna turn this so that it comes underneath, and I'm gonna try to get it so that it's fairly even. It's not gonna be perfect, and we are okay with that. Okay. I'm gonna try to find, oh, I lost my mark for the center. Okay. I'm just gonna fold this under. I'm gonna pin it all, fold that under, stab it. And then keep doing that all the way around, because really what we wanna do is try to get this all folded underneath, and then we're gonna stitch in the ditch. And we just want to get it folded under and evenly laid out across here. Okay, so I'm going to sort of eyeball it and try to make sure that it's the same distance from here as it is from here. I can see I got a little narrow on this side. Pin it down, fold this under, pin it down, and then we can sort of manipulate it if we need to. Okay, so I can see that's fairly even. All right, so now you can see underneath it's real funky looking because I've had to kind of pull this, and that's going to work out okay because we're going to sew it from this side, and we want this to actually have some bulk. So this should work out just fine. We'll give it a shot. You can see the bulk isn't between here, it's really in between all of these spaces. So let's go sew it down. We're just going to stitch right in the ditch all along here. So now we're going to bring it back over. I'm going to put my needle back in the center position where I want it. And then put this under here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to stitch right along this seam line between the orange and the black. So I'm trying to get it so that there'll be a little bit of a lip there. All right, get it secured and take these pins out. I'm gonna sew right along here. You can see I'm just sewing with a gray thread, but it's gonna hide in there because of the nap with Cuddle. It just kind of sinks in, it'll work out great. You could switch it to black if you felt more comfortable, or to the orange. But I use the gray and it works out just fine most of the time. All right, so we're just going to keep stitching right along there. You can see I'm just trying to smooth it out as I go, make sure that it's not puckering underneath at all. Okay, and then I'm holding out as far as it'll go, nice and flat. And like with most projects, if you sew it a little bit slower, you'll have better luck. Okay, move that out on here. Okay, I'm gonna shift that just so I can get it to stitch on right to the end. There we go. All right, now we're gonna cut the thread. All right, so now that we've got this piece, we're gonna take our extra piece of batting that we had from our Beak B piece, and we're gonna stick it in between these layers. Okay, and I'm just gonna stuff that in there, push it all the way to the bottom, and it gives a little bit of extra fluff here. Okay, and then I'm gonna pin along this top just to hold it in place, get those edges nice and even. Okay, when we come back along here, we're gonna have a few other layers. So I'm just gonna pin intermittently right now, because you're gonna see, do something a little bit funky, but it's gonna work. Okay, so I've got all of these in there, all of this stuff shoved in there. Make sure that you're using a high loft for this because you'll want the extra puff for it. So we're gonna come in here like this, pin that all, and then I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna put it on our pieces of batting. You can cut the batting pieces out prior like this, or you can actually do it on the squares of batting and then do the zigzag. I'll show you exactly how I mean there, but you can do it either way, with them pre-cut or do the squares and then you cut it out after you do the zigzag. But we're gonna put these all together so that they can then become one unit as we sew the beak completely together. Okay, so I'm just gonna pin this all the way around, getting that batting underneath it. So I'm gonna pull this out to the edge because I want that cuddle to come back out to where it was. You can see that it wants to kind of pull up to do a little gathering there. We don't want it to do that. We want it to come back out flat. Okay, so I'm just gonna pull it, make it be where I want it to be. And the pins will hold it in place. So this is definitely a situation where we want to use the pins and not the Wonder Clips, because the pins will hold it in place a lot better. The Wonder Clips won't hold this out as much as I want it to be held. Okay, so now that we've got this pinned all together, I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to zigzag around all of these edges to get it all secured together. All right, so I'm just going to bring this underneath here and I'm going to zigzag down this raw edge. So I'm going to change it to just a regular zigzag. It's 5 wide, 5 long. Okay, so it's a nice, really big zigzag, but all we're doing is trying to hold these edges together. Okay, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna use my stiletto to help feed it through, because we're stitching down all of these layers. It's a lot. Okay. Once we get it stitched down, it'll make it actually much easier to sew on the next round. So that's what this is for. Okay, it's all the way over. I'm gonna pivot. I'm gonna keep on sewing. So if it's not very neat right here, it's fine, because honestly, this is really just a basting stitch is sort of what this is gonna be. And it's gonna totally be hidden in the seam allowance. Make sure I get those pins out. Stitch down that edge, get it nice and flat. Okay, and this has kind of a point here at the end, but I'm just actually gonna curve it. So we're just gonna stitch right around this, doing sort of a basting stitch. Bring it all down, I get those pins out of my way. I'm just gonna make sure it catches that edge, because all we're doing is trying to baste it down so that when we do the next layer, it's a little bit easier to sew. And we're gonna just kind of round this bottom. It has a nice point on it, but I don't really want the point on the beak. I wanna keep it nice and round. Okay, so you could cut that off if you wanted to. I just stitch it so that it rounds. Okay, so this has a lot of bulk to it, so you're definitely going to want to take it nice and slow. Use a stiletto and open up that presser foot pressure to get it to feed through here nicely. Okay, I'm just going to come right back to the end, clip the threads. Now we're going to go back over there. So then we're going to come back over here, and I've got the front of my beak finished, and now we're going to put this so that it's right sides together. Now to make this so that we could actually turn it inside out, I'm not going to leave a side open. I'm actually going to cut a hole in the back, and then what we'll do is we can whip stitch that shut or leave it open, whichever one you prefer. All right, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to snip it. Okay. It's probably about 1.5 inches from the top, and I just want a smallish hole, but because it's knit, it's actually going to be totally fine to bring that around. Okay, so it's a little hole. We're just going to stick this in here. I'm just going to pin it a few times here, and then we'll sew it all together and then turn it through that hole. And you see I have to kind of stretch it just a little bit to fit, and that's fine, because if I stretch this back to fit, when it comes back around, it'll sort of pull in and keep the beak in check. I'm gonna stick these all the way around. Try to get that middle matched up to the middle. And you can see this is really nice and thick, so make sure that you're doing what you need to take it slowly and easily. All right, so now we've got this pinned together all the way around. Now I'm going to take it back to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew it with the batting side down so that it'll work through the machine maybe just a little bit easier. Okay? All right, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to change my stitch to a straight stitch again, 3.5. And I'm going to stick this under there. Okay, and we're going to do this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. So now we're going to sew this right along this edge. I'm just going to use the edge of my foot here as my guide for the 1/2 inch seam allowance. And it's going to do a little lock stitch, and I'm going to come all the way around, trying to get it to feed nice and evenly. Take my pins out as we go, and using this stiletto to keep it evenly feeding underneath the foot there. And like I said, I rounded out the bottom of the beak instead of making it so pointy. I wanted it to be rounder, like the one on our sample today. Okay, bring it around all the way up. You can see it's kind of struggling just a little bit because this is a lot of layers in there. Bring it up here. I'm gonna rotate, sew it across the top. And I'm sewing the whole thing shut. And we're just gonna turn it back through that hole that I've made. Okay, and there we go. All right, so now we're gonna clip our corners and turn it. So now once we've got this all the way sewn, I'm gonna take and I'm gonna trim these edges down so we have a little less bulk when we turn it. Okay, because we're not going to top stitch or anything, so we need to get rid of this. Keep it from being super puffy around the edges. All right, so I'm just trimming it along there. Get that edge off. You can see there's a lot to it. You can do this with just one layer of the batting on the inside here, and I'll show you a sample that I made before that just has one layer of the batting instead of the two, but you can do it either way. Okay, it kind of depends on what your machine will allow you to sew. I'm going to clip off these corners so it'll turn just a little bit better. This stuff I'm going to leave because the Cuddle will totally turn just fine. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing we've done on other projects. We just turn it right inside out. We're going to work it through that little hole. And you can see how big that hole is. It's not terribly huge, and it worked to bring it all the way through. When you're done here, you can leave it like this, or you can actually top stitch that shut. When you put it onto Pat's belly or on its face, then you're actually going to stitch this here, so you'll never see it. So we're just gonna pop those all out, bring it around, and we've got a little happy beak. All right, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna make this guy, and then it goes on to here, and this is all just top stitch down and then top stitch underneath, and you can't even see the hole. Ta-da. So this is one that has 2 layers of batting on the back side, so it's 3 layers overall here, which is a nice thick beak. This one has 2 layers, and you can see it's a little bit squishier and a little bit easier to sew. So if your machine's giving you any hassle, make sure you just use 2 layers of batting and it'll be easier. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Join us next week. We'll be making the wings for Pat as we continue on through a whole series of videos where we'll be doing different parts of Pat the Penguin. Join us next week. Thanks for watching. Happy sewing.